Hello, thanks for joining me again for another episode. Last time I was talking about my first couple of years in Colorado, learning to climb, getting to start climbing with Ryan, and figuring out all these new styles of climbing, and just being really psyched about it, having some adventures, and we were ready to take the adventures to the next level and head out to Europe and see what we could find out there. So Ryan and I put together kind of a spontaneous trip. We didn't really have much of an itinerary. We got a rental car, but we were just it was kind of open ended. We were gonna land in Paris and sort of figure it out when we went. We knew we wanted to go to Sayus and Chamonix and the Dolomites, but from there we didn't really know. So landed in Paris. The misadventures sort of started right away. I'd lost my wallet apparently back at the Chicago airport, so I can't remember how I ended up getting an ID again or how I even flew out of there eventually, but I didn't have any money or ID, so I think my parents ended up sending me some money via Western Union or something. But started the trip heading to Fontainebleau. It's this famous bouldering area just south of Paris, and I spent a couple days there just checking it out. And then headed down to Sayus, which was the venue for the world's first 515 rock climb put up by Sharma. Hung out there for a little while, and I can't remember the exact itinerary. We just started bopping around from place to place. Went from Sayus, then we went to Arco, Italy, and checked out a few different venues there. This beautiful sport climbing area right by the Lago di Garda. And went to the Chamonix Valley. It's just spectacular setting there in Chamonix with the Petit Dru and the Grand Girasse and Mont Blanc and all these different things. See, then we also went up to the Dolomites, and there was some trad climbing to be had up there on Sella Tower. But we started realizing that, and even in the Dolomites this was true, that most of the places in Europe, it seemed like everything was bolted, like set up for sport climbing. And so we decided to send all our traditional gear back and just started traveling with a rope and quick draws because it didn't seem like there was much need for traditional gear. So we had some good adventures along the way here. The Dolomites were these really tall limestone towers. And we continued traveling around, ended up going to Locarno, Switzerland. There was something like a 2,000-foot sport climbing route that we ended up doing out there. And after about 6 weeks of traveling around to these different spots, we started to have a falling out. We were having a lot of rain days and a lot of time spent in the tent, and I think we were just starting to get on each other's nerves. I was starting to feel the strong desire to want to just travel and be free and not have to be tied down to any kind of itinerary and not wanting to be with anyone in particular. And so Ryan decided to take the rental car and head back up to Germany. He had met this girl he wanted to go hang out with, and I decided to hitchhike back to Sayus and to continue the climbing trip. So I got back to Sayus, and I spent several weeks there. I ended up just meeting up with all sorts of different random people to climb with, and it was during this time at Sayus that I started to realize that I wasn't really that into sport climbing. I appreciated what it was. It's a really nice way to get strong, but it seems like everyone that was into sport climbing and the whole idea of sport climbing is kind of focused on the numbers. You know, like how hard can you climb? Like, oh, have you climbed 514 yet? You know, how much further until you can do that or whatever. And I found it seemed to be kind of the opposite of why I wanted to climb. Like I was into climbing for the exploration, the adventure, and learning how to traditional climb and being able to use that to potentially get up on new climbing terrain was what motivated me, and I was really psyched. I remember when I was in the Chamonix Valley looking at the Petit Dru, trying to talk Ryan into climbing that. It's this 2,000-foot granite tower, and it looked just like this amazing trad climb, but it's way up on the glacier. It was going to involve quite a lot of effort to be able to get up it, and I was talking to this Belgian guy about doing it, and I was really disappointed that I couldn't seem to talk anyone into climbing that route with me. But that was the direction that I wanted to head. Meanwhile, I had severely plateaued at Seiyus. Like, I could not climb anything harder than 12A. I might work a route for 20 times, or I might on-site it. Either way, 12A was the max that I was ever going to be able to do. I got on a 12B, and for whatever reason, it was like a mental block. I couldn't do it. And I realized that it was because I just wasn't psyched about it. I wasn't motivated. I was watching all these people come to Seiyus, at a certain level and leaving like much stronger climbers. And here I had basically stayed the same, and I was there for like a month. So I decided I had had enough of Seiyus and of sport climbing, and I just wanted to get out and see something different. So I decided to hitchhike south to the Verdon Gorge. I guess this is kind of the French version of big wall climbing. It's like this 1,000 to 1,500 foot walls in this narrow canyon, kind of like the Black Canyon of the Gunnison here in Colorado, but like limestone cliffs instead. And so I hitchhiked down there, and didn't have any climbing partners. I just started kind of trying to meet up with other climbers. I wound up climbing with a German couple for a couple days. And then I found a really good climbing partner. This guy, Icaro, was an Italian climbing guide, and he was climbing in a party of three with another Swiss couple. So I told them my situation, and they were psyched to have me with, because then they could climb in two parties of two. And the situation worked out great for me. I ended up getting guided around the Verdon Gorge for the next 2 weeks, and I ended up just kind of being his rope gun. Like, he would tell me where to go, and then I would climb it, but I didn't have to worry about how hard climbs were or where anything was or how to get to the base. So it was a great win-win situation, and I got a great tour of the Verdon. At the end of 2 weeks, those guys had to go back, and so I wound up meeting up with this other American guy from Boulder, this guy Dave, and I talked him into getting out of the Verdon. It was kind of end of October, starting to get pretty cold, so we headed a little further south, and from there, I just started kind of going from venue to venue. Sometimes I was with Dave, and I met up with these other traveling climbers. Some guys I had met in Seiyus, and some new guys. But we sort of created this climbing group of internationals. There was like a Japanese guy and some Germans. There was this Israeli guy, Elad, that I ended up partnering up with quite a bit, and it seemed like we couldn't really avoid the sport climbing. It was basically all that I could find to climb in Europe, but we made do with what we had, and I tried to make the best of it. And as the season progressed and got colder, we wound our way into Spain and then headed further south to El Chorro, and I learned how to make my dollars stretch, and I really enjoyed the whole traveling aspect of it. I learned how to travel super cheap. I mean, when I was on my transition days in the city, a lot of times I would just like sleep with the bums under a bridge overpass or something, and then when I was at the crags, sometimes I'd just sleep in caves or whatever was free, and learn how to buy cheap groceries and made the dollar stretch. So I was able to stay there for 5 months, and it was a great trip for me, but I had come to the realization that I really wanted to get into the bigger climbs. I'd witnessed all these huge alpine climbs, and I wanted to learn more about this. So when I got back to when I left Europe, I had the mindset that this was the direction that I wanted to head, and I wanted to learn about climbing first ascents. This was still something that was really fascinating to me. I felt like I had sort of gotten a taste of it as a high schooler, and getting on new terrain in the caves, and I wanted to explore new cliffs and see what that was all about. So in the next video, I'll talk about my transition back to Colorado and kind of learning how to alpine climb and learning about these different styles of climbing and where it all took me next. So thanks for joining me.